Former presidential candidates Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi have rejected the formation of a panel by the Guardian Council for a partial recount of June 12th votes. Both candidates have called for a new vote or the formation of what they call an independent panel to probe the alleged irregularities. The Guardian Council was planning to create a special committee of political figures and candidates' representatives to run a recount of 10% of the ballots in the presence of TV cameras. Now, with the candidates losing their 5-day deadline to present their representatives, the Council seems ready to call the result of the June 22nd election valid and dismiss the recount proposal. Mousavi held a press conference before the official announcement of the results. There he said he was the outright winner of the race. The unprecedented announcement, as the Interior Ministry says, forced the Electoral Commission to announce the results in a different way compared to previous elections. The row promptly escalated into an international issue. US President Barack Obama gradually changed his stance on Iran's vote and referred to Mousavi as a source of inspiration for protesters.
I think what's absolutely clear is, over the course of subsequent days, that Mousavi has shown to have captured the imagination or the spirit of forces within Iran that were interested in opening up.
Obama had earlier said there was no difference between Mousavi and President Ahmadinejad, given Mousavi's outright statements against the United States and Israel during his premiership in the 1980s. Mousavi's demand for a rerun of the election seems to have been rejected. The Guardian Council is poised to approve the results, and the establishment says it will not give in to any pressure. The establishment says the nullification of the election will set a trend for future elections. It says if this election is nullified and a new one is held, there will be no guarantee that the would-be defeated candidate in the new election would concede defeat, instead of sending his supporters onto the streets to protest the vote results.
Well, after the elections took place in Iran, the country is now facing two different simultaneous movements. First, it's contesting the election results by taking to Tehran streets, squares and rooftops. The second major effort is taking place in the policy community. Everyone is familiar with the global images projected in the media. However, what is actually happening behind closed doors in some circles is seen to be even more important. We're going to be talking about this process of Iranian special way of conflict resolution tonight with our guests joining us from Washington, Kenneth Katzman, the Middle East analyst from Congressional Research Service. Joining me in the studio here in Tehran, Mohammad Marandi, a professor of University of Tehran, and also from Tehran, Ghanbar Naderi joins us, a journalist for the Iran Daily. Many thanks for all of you for being with us here today on our special coverage here on Press TV. Mr. Naderi, I'd like to start with you. In their letters, Mehdi Karoubi and Mir Hossein Mousavi are expressing their deep lack of confidence in the watchdogs and organs of the elections. What has actually been done to appease them?
I think the whole agenda started a few months ago, and they had already started questioning the legitimacy of the Iranian Islamic system and also the validity of the election results. So this is not something new, and everybody knew about the whole outcome, and they knew that they are not going to win the election. That's why they began inciting public opinion way ahead of the results of the elections.
Let's go to the 4 points that have been made, apart from that argument there. Mr. Katzman, in general, there are 4 main points that have been brought forward to indicate a holistic and widespread fraud. Just to get those 4 to you, the election campaign and what the government did prior to election day, the collection of the votes on June 12th and the announcing of them, and summarising the results and announcing them, and what has taken place after announcing the results. Those 4 things are the main points that have been made. Is it sufficient to annul an election based on those claims?
First of all, let me just say I'm speaking here as an expert on Iran and not for the Congressional Research Service or Congress or anybody. I think the position of officials in Tehran and the Guardian Council is that if an election were annulled and a new election held, there have been a lot of events post-election that might shape the new election, any new election, and a new election would not therefore be held under the same conditions and same atmosphere as the original election. So the Guardian Council, I think, is really staying to their position, which is we can do a sample of some ballots, recount them, and have outside observers watch the recount, but I think the Guardian Council would say that that's not the conditions to hold a new election. I myself, my view is, we have an 11 million vote difference between the 2 main candidates, and that's a big that's a big difference. And if there was just outright fraud, in other words, if the election were completely charade, some sort of a play or something, you would have a lot of people involved in such a conspiracy, I think, to have such a big fraud. And I think by now we would hear that how the fraud was committed and what the conspiracy was, and we're not hearing it. So, it's a little difficult sitting here in Washington to judge the election and all, but obviously there's differences of opinion on both sides.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Well, it's not just in Iran. We've seen in other countries street protests on the streets, and those in other instances have overturned an election result when its transparency has been questioned. Do you foresee such a procedure happening in Iran?
Well, no, I don't really right now. What I was looking for in the protests was are lot of segments of Iranian society joining these protesters, and I didn't necessarily see a broad base of society joining these protesters, and that's what I think would have been needed, I think, to pressure the officials to have a new election. As workers going on strike, the bazaar closing down, people from the villages coming in to join the protests expanding every day. And when I didn't see that, my view was that maybe many Iranians were not convinced that this was a fraudulent election. Maybe many Iranians thought the election was not conducted perfectly, but fair enough. And they didn't necessarily join the protesters in large numbers.
Mr. Marandi, of course, there are some people that think there has been fraud, and they've been on the street, and a big part of this is conflict resolution, which is defined differently and dealt with differently, implemented by different mechanisms in different countries. Can you just briefly explain the process of conflict resolution that we've seen in Iran over this incident?
Well, after the elections, it is for the Guardian Council to give a final approval. It is the norm that after the election results come out, the leader, in this case Ayatollah Khamenei, always congratulates the people of Iran and the victor. And assuming that things have run smoothly unless proven otherwise. And this was just, in this case, we had this happen as in previous occasions. Then after Mr. Mousavi and Mr. Karoubi started speaking about irregularities and fraud and widespread fraud and so on, the Guardian Council, which has to give a final approval, they have to go through the voting process, and also they have to address the accusations put forth by the candidates. The Guardian Council had 5 days. They added an extra 5 days. Since the two of the candidates were adamant that they did not trust the Guardian Council for whatever reasons, they established a special committee of six major political figures who are known throughout the country to be centrist, and people like Dr. Velayati, Dr. Haddad, they're well known and well respected. But still, it seems that Mr. Mousavi